Just so we're clear. Ethan leaned in, his voice laced with smug certainty. We wanted you to hear it now, so there's no confusion later. Everything goes to us. His words landed like a punch to the gut, knocking the air from my lungs. The lasagna on my plate, the one Mom had promised would bring me home, suddenly felt like lead in my stomach. The dining room fell silent, save for the distant hum of traffic beyond the cul-de-sac. My heart pounded as I looked across the polished cherrywood table at Ethan and Sienna, my younger twin siblings. Both of them wore matching smirks, their eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Excuse me? My voice wavered despite my effort to keep it steady. What do you mean, everything? Exactly what he said, Olivia cut in sharply, her usual smile gone, replaced by a firm, unyielding expression. Your father and I have finalized our will, and we wanted you to hear it directly from us. The house, the lake cottage, everything, it's all going to Ethan and Sienna. I turned to Dad, searching his face for any sign of hesitation, any hint that this was some cruel misunderstanding. But he wouldn't meet my eyes. He stared down at the silverware in front of him, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched between us until, finally, he spoke, his tone quiet, measured. Olivia and I have talked about this a lot, he began, folding his hands carefully. And, Margot, you have to understand our reasoning. You've done well for yourself. We're proud of everything you've built. Ethan and Sienna, they're still finding their way. They need more support. I blinked hard, willing back the sting of tears. Support? For years, I had shouldered this family's financial burdens, never once asking for recognition. I covered their mortgage payments. I paid for Ethan's endless college transfers. I funded Sienna's expensive whims, her hobbies, her business ideas, every fleeting passion project. And now, none of it mattered. A sharp pain twisted in my chest as I looked at my parents, their faces set, their decision made. This wasn't just unfair, it was betrayal. So this is my reward, I said, my voice low, steady. After 4 years of paying your mortgage? After covering tuition? After sinking $30,000 into renovating that lake cottage last summer? You're cutting me out because I worked hard and made something of myself? Mom let out a dramatic sigh, shaking her head like I was some ungrateful child. This is exactly why we hesitated to tell you, Margot. You always make it about money. It's never about family with you. Heat rose to my cheeks, my hands curling into fists beneath the table. It's always been about family, I shot back. Every sacrifice I made was because of family. Because you asked me to, Mom. Because you said family sticks together. Ethan scoffed, leaning back in his chair, arms crossed, his smirk deepening. Oh, give it a rest. No one forced you to help. You just liked playing the hero. Sienna laughed softly, twirling a strand of her perfectly styled hair, eyes gleaming with amusement. Maybe you thought that if you threw enough money at us, Mom and Dad would finally love you as much as they love us. Her words cut deep, reopening a wound I had spent years trying to ignore. I glanced at my parents, waiting for them to say something, to tell her she was out of line. But they didn't. They sat there in silence, their lack of defense louder than anything they could have said. They had always protected Ethan and Sienna, always made excuses for them. And now, after everything, I was the one being painted as selfish. Anger surged through me, burning away the last traces of patience. You're right, Ethan, I said finally, my voice eerily calm. No one forced me to help. But from now on, no one will guilt me into being this family's ATM either. I'm done. Pushing my chair back, I stood abruptly, ignoring the startled looks around the table. The scent of marinara and garlic still hung in the air, a cruel reminder of the comforting family dinner I had foolishly expected. Instead, I had been ambushed, humiliated, and discarded in the very home I had helped keep afloat. As I grabbed my coat from the hallway, the front door swung shut behind me with a final, resolute thud, sealing me off from the voices inside. Voices that, from this moment on, no longer mattered. Outside, the crisp Portland air hit my skin, sharp and sobering, but it did little to dull the raw ache in my chest. My own family had used me, discarded me, and left me questioning my worth. I climbed into my car, yanking the door shut with more force than necessary, gripping the steering wheel as hot tears finally spilled down my face. The drive back to my apartment downtown was a blur of silent streets and memories that refused to stay buried. Every sacrifice I had made, every cancelled vacation, every night spent awake juggling spreadsheets and payments to keep them comfortable, it all came rushing back, a cruel montage of misplaced love and obligation. I had done it all without question, without hesitation, convinced that my efforts mattered. That I mattered. How foolish I'd been to believe that. By the time I reached my apartment, everything around me felt unfamiliar, as if the air itself had shifted. I poured a generous glass of Cabernet, the expensive one I'd been saving for a special occasion. Tonight's bitter lesson seemed fitting enough. Settling onto the couch, I opened my banking app. The transactions stared back at me like a mockery. $1,800 marked parents' mortgage, another $600 for their utilities. Without hesitation, I canceled them both. A quiet defiance stirred in my chest as the confirmation messages flashed across the screen. As night stretched on, the conversation from dinner played on repeat in my head. Slowly, anger gave way to something heavier, deep, hollow sadness. This wasn't just about money. It never had been. It was about a lifetime of feeling second best, a truth they had finally confirmed with cold finality. And yet, beneath the hurt, something new took root. Relief. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of obligation begin to lift. My worth had never been defined by their approval, and now, for the first time, I was free to live without their expectations chaining me down. I knew my parents, Ethan and Sienna, wouldn't let this go easily. There would be calls, arguments, guilt trips. Maybe even retaliation. But as I drained the last sip of wine from my glass, I made myself a quiet promise. No matter how hard they pushed, I was done. Done being their safety net, their ATM, their afterthought. They had invited me home to tell me I was getting nothing. Instead, they had given me something far more valuable. Freedom. Sleep never found me that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every humiliating moment in my mind. The smugness in Ethan's voice. The quiet amusement in Sienna's eyes. And worst of all, my parents' silence, an absence of defense that spoke louder than any insult. By sunrise, exhaustion had wrung me dry. I stumbled out of bed, brewed the strongest coffee I could manage, and sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the steam rising from my mug. The morning news murmured in the background, meaningless noise against the storm still raging in my mind. Had I been blind all these years? Or had I simply refused to see the truth, desperate to believe I was more to them than a convenient source of stability? The sharp vibration of my phone on the wooden table snapped me out of my thoughts. Mom. My stomach twisted, and I let it ring. A few moments later, the voicemail notification blinked on the screen. Against my better judgment, I hit play. Olivia, please stop being so dramatic, Mom's voice came through, thick with exasperation. Call me back. You know family doesn't treat each other like this. A hollow laugh escaped my lips. Family. Her favorite weapon of manipulation. Family only seemed to matter when it served their needs, never mine. I deleted the voicemail and set my phone aside, refusing to cave to Mom's carefully practiced guilt trips. But the calls kept coming. First from her, then Dad. Soon, Ethan and Sienna chimed in, their messages swinging between patronizing lectures and sarcastic demands. Not one of them carried even a hint of remorse, only growing frustration that their financial safety net had suddenly disappeared. After an especially venomous call from Sienna accusing me of selfishness and jealousy, I blocked them all. For the first time in years, silence settled around me, fragile and unfamiliar. And yet, beneath that quiet, I felt something deeper, an ache that pulsed in the background, one I wasn't sure would ever fully fade. To keep from drowning in it, I threw myself into work. Bennett Construction's latest project, a sleek medical office complex in Sacramento, demanded my full focus. Meetings, blueprints, client walkthroughs, all things I had once handled with ease now became my escape. I extended my hours, volunteered for extra travel, anything to delay facing the emptiness of my newly quiet evenings. 3 weeks passed without a single word from my family. I let myself believe, however cautiously, that they had accepted my decision. But deep down, I knew better. And then, on a Friday afternoon, my phone lit up with a text that sent a cold jolt through me. Family meeting tonight, Olivia. You owe it to us to be there. My pulse pounded in my ears as I read it again. Owe them? I didn't owe them a damn thing. And yet, despite everything, something gnawed at me through curiosity, maybe. Or some foolish hope that, for once, they were reaching out to mend things rather than demand something from me. Before I could overthink it, I typed a single-word reply. Fine. Pulling into my parents' driveway that evening felt surreal. Ethan's flashy motorcycle and Sienna's obnoxiously bright blue Kia sat parked side by side, twin monuments to entitlement. A knot of dread coiled in my stomach as I stepped out of my car, the house before me feeling less like home and more like an enemy's fortress. Mom opened the door, her forced smile barely concealing her irritation. Olivia, glad you decided to come, she said stiffly, ushering me inside. Margot's here too. That made me pause. My Aunt Margot sat in the corner of the living room, watching with cautious sympathy. She rarely involved herself in family drama, which meant even she must have sensed how bad this had gotten. I took a seat across from her, my heart beat loud in my ears as Ethan and Sienna entered, their stares openly hostile. Dad cleared his throat, his expression hard. We called this meeting to clear the air, Olivia, he said. Your mother and I thought you'd have come to your senses by now. Clearly, we were wrong. My hands curled into fists beneath the table. Come to my senses? I repeated, my voice trembling despite my effort to keep it level. You cut me out completely after everything I've done for this family. Every mortgage payment, every tuition bill, and you expect me to just accept it? Stop being dramatic, Mom huffed, rolling her eyes. Yes, you helped, but that's what older siblings do. Ethan and Sienna deserve stability. It's not our fault you chose work over family. A bitter laugh escaped me, sharp and humorless. I chose work over family? I repeated, stunned. I built my career because you needed my money. I sacrificed vacations, friendships, relationships, so you could all maintain this illusion of security. Oh, spare us, Ethan scoffed, leaning back in his chair. Nobody asked for your pity or charity. Sienna smirked, arms crossed. Maybe if you weren't so busy playing savior, you'd actually have your own life by now. Heat surged to my face, humiliation twisting deep in my gut. Margot shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Neither did my parents. Their silence was louder than any argument. I stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the hardwood. You know what? I said, my voice steadier than I felt. You're right. My mistake was believing I mattered here. I won't make that mistake again. I turned for the door. Behind me, Dad's voice cut through the room like a blade. If you walk out now, Olivia, don't expect to be welcome back. I hesitated, my fingers tightening around the doorknob, years of suppressed anger finally surging to the surface. That's fine, I said, my voice low and cold, shaking only from the sheer effort it took to hold back the fury simmering beneath. I've never felt welcome here anyway. Outside, beneath a sky littered with indifferent stars, hot tears spilled down my cheeks. Each step toward my car felt heavier than the last, as the truth settled over me like a lead weight. My family had never truly valued me. I wasn't loved, I was useful. Convenient. Disposable. When I reached my apartment, I locked the door behind me, sealing them out, not just physically, but from my life. The silence that greeted me was strangely comforting, wrapping around me like armor. A soft knock at the door shattered the stillness, sending a jolt of adrenaline through me. My heart pounded as I cautiously approached, peering through the peephole. Margot. I opened the door without a word, and she stepped inside, her expression etched with quiet concern. Without hesitation, she pulled me into a tight embrace, her warmth dissolving the last of my restraint. I'm sorry, Olivia, Margot whispered, her voice thick with emotion. They're wrong. You deserve so much more than this. Her words cracked something inside me, and the tears I had been holding back finally fell freely. She held me as I sobbed, allowing years of hurt and resentment to spill out in ragged, silent waves. When the storm inside me finally settled, she pulled back slightly, meeting my gaze with quiet conviction. They'll never admit it, she said, but they're scared. Scared of losing control, of facing the truth. Her words lingered long after she left. That night, as I sat in the dim glow of my laptop, I stared at the numbers on my screen, numbers that had dictated my life for years. $1,800 for my parents' mortgage. $600 for their utilities. Countless transfers simply labeled family help. The cursor hovered over the cancel button, my breath shallow. Even after everything, guilt coiled tightly around my chest, whispering the same old lies of duty and obligation. Family sticks together, Olivia. Family sacrifices. But tonight had shattered any remaining illusions. Their betrayal, so effortless, so complete, had laid the truth bare. I wasn't family to them. I was an ATM with a pulse. Ethan's smug smirk flashed in my mind, sealing my decision. With one sharp click, the mortgage payment vanished. Another click, and the utilities followed. The rush of relief was so powerful, it nearly stole my breath. For the first time in years, I was free. At some point, exhaustion claimed me. When I woke, the soft hues of dawn had painted Portland's skyline in pale lavender and gold. Then my phone buzzed, shattering the peace. Dread curled in my stomach even before I saw the name flashing on the screen. Mom. I inhaled slowly, steadying myself before answering. Olivia, what have you done? She shrieked, skipping any pretense of a greeting. The bank called, they're threatening foreclosure. You had no right. A strange calm settled over me. No right? I echoed. Mom, I paid your mortgage voluntarily. But after what happened, I'm done being your safety net. You're our daughter, she snapped, her voice rising with fury. You owe us respect. I owe you nothing, I said, my patience snapping. Respect isn't one-sided. You made your choice, and now I've made mine. Olivia. I'm sorry you're upset, I cut in before she could launch into another tirade, but I can't do this anymore. Goodbye. I ended the call before she could respond, my hands trembling. The calls didn't stop. Dad. Sienna. Even distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years tried their hand at guilt-tripping me into submission. Every voicemail dripped with manipulation, with empty demands for family loyalty. Eventually, I silenced my phone. And with it, their power over me. Weeks passed, and life slowly began to feel like my own again. Work wasn't just an escape, it became fulfilling. I booked the trip to Italy I'd been dreaming about for years, finally spending my hard-earned money on myself. Independence settled into my bones like something I had been missing all along. Still, loneliness crept in on quiet nights, a dull ache where family ties had once been. A reminder of what I had lost. Or maybe, a reminder of what I had finally let go of. Then came Sacramento, a 3-day trip to oversee final inspections at our latest medical complex project. The timing couldn't have been better, offering me a much-needed escape from lingering frustration and family drama. When I returned late Friday evening, exhaustion clung to me as I approached my apartment door, dragging my suitcase behind me. But something felt off. The closer I got, the more obvious it became. Thick, hardened foam oozed from every crevice of my doorframe, sealing it completely shut. My stomach dropped. Heart pounding, I reached out and touched the foam. It was dry, rock solid. Deliberately sprayed into every crack to ensure I couldn't enter. Panic surged through me, quickly giving way to a familiar, simmering rage. Only one person came to mind, someone petty and vindictive enough to do this. Ethan. Furious, I dialed building management, pacing the hallway as I waited. Hours later, a tired-looking locksmith finally arrived, shaking his head at the extent of the damage. As he chipped away at the foam, he muttered grimly, "Whoever did this really didn't want you getting inside." My blood boiled at the thought of Ethan smirking as he sprayed my doorway shut, punishing me for daring to stand up for myself. By the time the locksmith finished, it was nearly midnight. Inside, adrenaline still thrummed through me, anger burning too hot to let sleep take over. Then I remembered something. My hallway security camera. Heart racing, I sat at my desk and pulled up the footage. My breath caught as I scrolled through the recordings, until there he was. Ethan. His baseball cap was pulled low, hooded sweatshirt obscuring his face, but there was no mistaking him. My stomach churned as I watched him deliberately seal my door shut, his movements precise, his expression gleeful. This wasn't just petty revenge. This was cruelty. With shaking hands, I saved the footage, anger solidifying into cold determination. For a moment, I hesitated. Could I really turn my own brother over to the police? But this wasn't just another family argument. Ethan had crossed a line, from selfishness into something criminal. I needed advice. I called Margot. Olivia. Her voice was steady, gentle, but firm. If you don't hold Ethan accountable now, he'll never learn. Protecting him isn't kindness, it's enabling. Her words gave me the resolve I needed. The next morning, I filed a police report, handing over the footage as evidence. The fallout was immediate. My phone exploded with furious voicemails, my family calling me vindictive, heartless, a traitor. But beneath the anger, I could hear something else. Fear. For the first time, they realized I wasn't bluffing. That they no longer had control over me. Then Dad called. His voice was tight, brittle with forced calm. What will it take, Olivia, for you to drop the charges? $3,000, I said instantly. The exact cost of the repairs. That's extortion, he snapped. I didn't flinch. No. That's consequences. Ethan vandalized my home. Either he pays, or he faces the charges. His choice. Silence. Then the line went dead. By the next morning, a transfer appeared in my account. Exactly $3,000. Labeled bitterly as final payment. A slow, triumphant breath left my chest. It wasn't about the money. It was the principle. For once, I had forced them to acknowledge their actions had consequences. Ethan's childish stunt hadn't broken me. If anything, it had reinforced something undeniable: I was free of them. Standing in my doorway, my apartment finally restored, I let out a deep breath. They had betrayed me, hurt me, pushed me to the brink. But they had also unknowingly set me free. And now, at last, I could build my life on my own terms. 4 weeks after Ethan's stunt, the silence from my family was deafening. No angry messages. No desperate pleas. At first, it felt like relief. But soon, their absence became something else entirely, an inescapable reminder of what I had lost. My parents had made their choice. And once again, I wasn't the one they chose. Then the rumors started. Margot called late one evening, her voice tinged with quiet urgency. Olivia, your mom's been talking. She's telling everyone you abandoned them, that you're trying to make your parents homeless. My stomach dropped. That's ridiculous, I whispered, gripping my phone tighter. They left me no choice. I know that, Margot said gently. But others don't. They think you stopped helping out of greed. That you're selfish. The accusation hit deep, twisting like a knife in my gut. My parents were rewriting history, casting themselves as helpless victims and me as the villain. Years of sacrifice, every cancelled vacation, every postponed dream, every financial burden I had carried, erased as if they had never mattered. I paced my apartment, frustration burning through my sadness. For years, I had swallowed my anger, accepted their treatment, let them define my role in this family. Not anymore. Determined, I sat at my laptop. My fingers flew over the keyboard as I laid out the truth in a Facebook post: every mortgage payment, every tuition bill, every entitled demand from Ethan and Sienna, even the damage Ethan had done to my apartment. Every dollar. Every sacrifice. Every ounce of quiet resentment. My hands trembled as I clicked post, releasing years of buried pain into the open. The response was immediate. Comments poured in within minutes, some filled with shock and sympathy, horrified at how I had been used for so long. Others were sharp with disapproval, scolding me for exposing private family matters. Then came Mom's furious voicemail. How dare you humiliate us like this? You have no right. Her indignation triggered something raw inside me. I had no right? I called her immediately, anger crackling through me like fire. You lied to everyone, I snapped the second she answered. After everything I've done, you painted me as selfish just to save face. You abandoned us, she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. All because we chose to help your siblings, the ones who needed it most. No, I corrected, my voice shaking. You abandoned me the moment you decided my efforts meant nothing. You taught Ethan and Sienna entitlement instead of responsibility. And now you're paying the price. You've destroyed this family, she whispered, her voice cold. No, I said softly. You did that yourself. I ended the call, my heart pounding, vision blurred with tears. Guilt clawed at me, persistent and sharp. Had I really destroyed my family by refusing to accept their betrayal? Was I wrong for finally standing up for myself? A knock at the door startled me from my thoughts. I opened it to find Margot standing there, Concern etched across her face. Without a word, she pulled me into a hug, her quiet presence offering the kind of unconditional support I had longed for. "Olivia," she said as she stepped inside, "your post changed everything. Some of the family finally sees the truth now. Your mom hid your contributions all these years. They had no idea." I exhaled slowly, relief and sadness mixing in equal measure. "Does it even matter anymore?" I murmured. "Yes," Margot said firmly, taking my hand. "Your voice matters. You deserve recognition for everything you've done. Your parents chose dishonesty, but that doesn't mean you have to live under their shadow anymore." Her words settled deep inside me, planting a seed of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Strength. Slowly, the pain began to dull, replaced by something steadier, something solid. I was no longer hiding. No longer silent. The truth hurt, but it was mine. Days later, my phone buzzed unexpectedly. A text from Sienna, short, bitter. "Thanks a lot. Everyone hates us now. Hope you're proud." I stared at the message, feeling strangely detached. I had spent years chasing their approval, molding myself into whatever they needed, sacrificing my own happiness just to belong. And now, standing amidst the wreckage of our relationship, I finally saw the truth. Their acceptance had never been real. It had always come with strings. With conditions. I typed my response, calm and certain. "I'm done apologizing for your choices. Maybe now you'll finally learn responsibility." She never replied. Weeks passed. The backlash from distant relatives slowly faded. And for the first time in my life, I no longer cared. Without my financial support, my parents struggled, forced into part-time jobs and facing the debts they had ignored for years. Ethan remained as irresponsible as ever, refusing to take accountability for anything, while Sienna drifted aimlessly, bitter but unwilling to change. Meanwhile, my own life quietly flourished. For the first time, my choices belonged solely to me. I was free, not just financially, but emotionally. I had faced the painful truth, endured my family's betrayal, and come out stronger. I had uncovered a resilience I never knew existed. My parents had thought that leaving me nothing in their will would devastate me. Instead, they had given me the greatest gift imaginable. The courage to choose myself. 6 months passed, and the toxic shadow of my family finally faded from my daily life. At first, the silence haunted me, a constant reminder of everything I had lost. But slowly, the sharp edges of betrayal softened, replaced by something new. Relief. I poured myself into my career, earning a promotion that came with a corner office and the kind of salary I had once only dreamed about. And for the first time, my paycheck belonged entirely to me. No more mortgage payments vanishing into someone else's house, no frantic midnight transfers covering Ethan's latest crisis or Sienna's impulsive spending. Every dollar was mine. Proof that choosing myself wasn't selfish, it was necessary. With my newfound financial freedom, I finally booked the 2-week trip to Italy I had postponed for years. Standing on a balcony in Florence, watching the sun melt into the glowing skyline, I felt something profound settle over me. Joy. Not the fleeting kind, dampened by guilt or obligation, but something real, something weightless. Back home, I joined a hiking group, reclaiming weekends that had once been swallowed by my family's endless demands. On one of those hikes, I met Lucas, his easy smile and thoughtful conversations a quiet balm to wounds I was still learning to heal. His presence filled a space my family had left empty, showing me that I was worthy of love without conditions. Months passed peacefully. Then, on a cold November evening, an unexpected knock at my door. I opened it to find Margot, wrapped in her favorite sweater, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. Without a word, she stepped inside and pulled me into a tight embrace. "I'm proud of you, Olivia," she whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. "You deserve all the happiness you can find." As we sat together, sipping coffee, she finally spoke the words I had long suspected. "Your parents still blame you for everything. They won't change, Olivia. But you? You've grown stronger. You chose yourself. That's bravery." I swallowed against the tightness in my throat. "I still think about them," I admitted. "Not because I regret walking away, but because it still hurts, knowing they never truly loved me the way I loved them." Margot squeezed my hand, her expression gentle but firm. Sometimes, family isn't about blood, she said softly. It's about who truly sees you. Her words sank deep, filling a hollow space I hadn't realized was still there. That night, as we talked and laughed, I finally understood. Family isn't just about DNA. It's about those who value you, respect you, and choose you, not out of obligation, but out of love. In the weeks that followed, whispers from distant relatives painted a bleak picture of my parents' situation. Mom was working early shifts at a diner, exhaustion weighing heavy on her features. Dad had taken a physically demanding job at a hardware store, pushing himself far beyond what was healthy for his age. Ethan, unsurprisingly, had quit his latest job, refusing to take responsibility for his own failures. And Sienna was still lost in her fantasy of becoming an Instagram influencer, chasing a dream that would never materialize. On Christmas Eve, instead of dwelling on the past, I chose to celebrate the present. I invited close friends over, filling my home with warmth, laughter, and a sense of belonging I had never felt with my family. Margot joined us, watching me with quiet pride as I embraced a life I had once believed was out of reach. Later that night, after the guests had gone, I stood by the window, gazing out over the city lights illuminating Portland. The pain of betrayal still lingered, like a fading scar. But that pain had shaped me. It had made me stronger, teaching me to honor my own worth. My parents had tried to punish me by cutting me out of their will, thinking it would break me. But all they had done was set me free. In the end, their rejection had been my greatest liberation. They left everything to Ethan and Sienna. But they had unknowingly given me something far more valuable, the chance to finally choose myself. So tell me, what would you have done in my place? Would you have kept sacrificing for a family who never saw your worth? Or would you have walked away, even if it meant losing them forever? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.